fascinated by not the geographical metaphors that are coming up so much. It's not that. It's has something. It's not here or there, or here, but it has something to do with in between this. Everybody is talking all the time about bridges, crossings over, and it's that process itself that I found most interesting in what everybody has been talking about today. Neither here nor there, but the crossing over and the in-between, in fact. And so much has been said that is so interesting that I really don't want to myself ask any real questions. I would like everybody to start, if you don't mind, by answering your question. What do we do this time? And then perhaps after we're done with that, if there are other questions on other things, fine. Otherwise, I can add a couple of things at the end. But basically, I'd rather hear what you have to say to her. Does anybody have any suggestions? Anybody willing? Oh. Please? No? Oh, come on. All right, well, then, if you're going to oblige me to do this, then I will, I really don't think that I need it. I wanted to ask you a little bit, I don't know if this is legitimate or not, because maybe you don't want to answer that, but several people have mentioned a kind of an obstacle. Somebody provided a kind of an obstacle. Would you be willing to say something about that? To what?
An obstacle to?
Well, what? To, what is his name?
Schroeder.
Yeah. Willing to say anything?
Well, I mean,
No. Don't have to, but it came up twice. So, two different people. Yeah, there you go.
I don't really have the details at hand. All I remember.
You don't need it. You don't need it.
Yeah, I think we can all.
Just use one. Maybe just use one.
Yeah.
I'm turning. I would turn them off.
One is fine.
No, I have none.
Just move. Wow.
I don't have any details at hand, but there was always a conflict between the lawyer in Seattle, what Aksionov was saying from Moscow, and Carl. So there would, Aksionov would say, do you want to answer this, Ellen Dale?
Yeah, in summary, it was that Schroeder was making his own deals. We had a contract with Aksionov, we had a contract with every author we published, by the way, and Schroeder would go around that, thinking that he had a better hot deal for Aksionov, so there would be endless conflicts of interest.
Curious, if I may add, because I knew Schroeder, he actually called himself Schroeder, as I recall. Anyway, that doesn't matter. But he was very interested, especially in the Ginsburg case, because of course that brought money. Aksionov probably didn't bring him any money.
He did in the World Rights.
I see.
Remember, as the American audience was
Okay.
not interested in translated literature.
Okay.
Such as
I see.
But what you bought when you bought a joke and when you bought Sandro was world rights.
Okay.
German rights alone, French
Okay.
rights alone,
Got it.
sometimes English rights. That would be worth much
Yeah.
more than the American. And he was trying to maximize it, but then they later got real agents who knew what they were doing and were not located on the West Coast, which was not optimal.
But he was a very interesting person, however. He was involved in the Jackson-Vanik Amendment. I mean, he was instrumental. And he spent time in Israel. He was Department of Justice or something. So, No, I'm just saying, I'm talking about Leonard Schrader. Yeah. But I remember that Aksionov was fond of him.
They were all fond of the first people that helped her. And
That was it, because his mother, of course, money came with her memoirs.
Well, how about we finish, you want to finish first with what you were doing?
Let's take questions.
Sure. Tony and
Tony and Emily from the New School. I have two quick questions. One is for Ron and one is for Polina. Ron, can you comment a little bit on your little quote about Joseph and the others had their heads up their asses when they read it, meaning Azhog? I'd love to hear something about the reaction of Brodsky and the others to Azhog. And Polina, if you could tell us a little bit about the questionnaire thing you started out. I mean, how Salisbury collected the information. I mean, I know he was in Russia from the war until the early 50s, as I remember, and I just wonder, was he collecting stuff then about the siege, and how that worked, and do the questionnaires survive at the archives, stuff like that?
So about the Joseph, the Brodsky and Aksionov relationship comes up several times in the correspondence. They start. At the beginning, they were very close friends. Well, not close friends, but
They were very close.
they were close friends. Okay, and there's a letter from Aksionov asking about Aksionov's health. He's just had a heart bypass operation and things. So I mean, real concern. And then in Paris in the mid-70s, maybe a little bit later, there's clearly some sort of falling out, and we just get hints of it. And then about a year later, Carl mentions that Brodsky had been to visit and calls something shit, and he says, "Oh, but I shouldn't.
Ashok is shit. He
But I
was.
shouldn't say that to you.
Oh.
I'm not supposed to use that word," something like that. And one of the last things, not last, but one of the later things in the period that I didn't look at in 1984, there's Aksionov's letter to Brodsky. Basically, like, you really are incredibly.
Basically what?
This is the fight. This is the fight of the
Forrest Strauss.
And which I describe in my memoir of Brodsky, because the Russians have published a drastically sanitized version of it in Lois's book, which is that Forrest Strauss gave Joseph Ajok to read as the outside reader to determine if they were translated. Joseph didn't read it to the end. He didn't like long prose, especially if it wasn't by a Leningrader. And he simply said to them, "This is shit, don't publish it." And then that got all over New York, and it took, 6 years to get Ajok published finally. So when Vassar heard all of this, they had an extreme falling out.
No, the letter. The letter is very strong. I thought we were friends. Blah blah blah. I mean, anyway. But it's outside of the time period I chose. So.
If I may add something to that, when Aksionov was in Los Angeles in '75, Brodsky would call me in a very kind of, this is Olesha. His tone was nothing like what one would imagine Brodsky to be. "Can I talk to Vasya? Can you help me?" Because he was really wanting to come to, he came to Michigan, right? And they met there and they traveled back to New York together. And
They agreed together.
yes, they were, and I remember talking to Brodsky later, after the ship part, asked him, "Why did you do that?" Because I remember how you called me and, you were really the one who wanted to see Aksionov rather than the other way around. At least that was my impression. started saying, well, I used to admire him so much when I was young. That's probably, I don't know. You know, he was my model. I looked up to him. All this, if I may say, bullshit. Yeah? And he went on, and I kept again saying, you know, I may not like the novel, but he was a friend of yours. Just say you don't want to review it, or something like that. And he finally, this is the brilliant line that the hilarious line that he used. He said, what do you expect from a shtetl Jew? Shtetl Jew. Can you believe that?
Well, Carl had already read him right after he told him he was telling Vassal that he was ruining
No,
his
but I mean the line, what do you expect from a shtetl Jew? That is by no means Joseph Brodsky, right? A shtetl Jew. But obviously he wanted to get me off his back and stop talking about this. Yeah. I'm sorry.
I'm kind of speechless, but anyway. We knew this would be an event of amazing stories. Since the magic returned, and since thank you very much for your kind of empowering gesture, and since this will be a question, and is a question of mine very seriously, how one publishes something that reminds me in the best possible version of Pale Fire, right? When the commentary dances a very peculiar dance with a triggering original. So this is the first page of Titradechka. This is handwriting in English, and this is the first suggestion, Iosif Arbeli, I owe him my life twice over. So the comment immediately goes and kind of writes himself into the text and into history. This is what I find interesting. And this is the page where Diakonov reveals himself. And this is why I thought that Shakespeare is kind of welcome, since this is a story about self, a little bit, if you know how. I can read it. I can read it.
If you want to make it
A little bit larger.
Yeah.
go into slides.
Slide, go to slide.
Oops, sorry, where?
Slide, wait.
Slide down here.
Slideshow.
Go up, view, you see view, up, up, up. Yeah,
This?
yeah, and slide.
Click on the slide. No.
Or go, oh, okay, another way is to do go all the way down to the right.
Yeah. Go to the further up.
You want a bigger size.
Listen to us.
Yeah.
Great. Up. Go up or no?
Go to slide view right there. There's right next to the minus and plus.
Sorry.
Yeah, the next, right to the right of that, to the right of that. Yes, press on that.
No. Yes, okay. I will read it. As to me, I don't want to be anonymous to you. My name is Igor Diakonov. I'm a professor and honorary member of the American Oriental Society and of the British Academy. But as I have said, the times have changed. And this is, I think, goes to our conversation about temporality of TAMIZDAT and various kind of sense of time in connection to what we're discussing. So if you would find it possible, as I hope, to use my notes in the new edition of your great book, please do not mention my name, or do give me the name of, say, Alexei Fedorov. And I think one of the questions that we're discussing, one of the topics that we come to rather often is TAMIZDAT and pseudonym. pseudonyms, a huge problem of the imaginary identities and all kinds of. It is this atmosphere of the 70s which makes me write this letter to you as a note to page 527. Tikhonov, by page 527, comes out of his hiding place. Because I think the reason being that for him, the story that he is weaving is so personal that he just cannot resist. He cannot stand being anonymous. In spite of certain danger, he was большой чиновник in Leningrad at the moment. Back to your question. Yes, questionnaires are in the archive. I saw only questionnaires in English. So as I understand, he used them at the phase of work on his book when he was here, very much after he returned from the Soviet Union. He wasn't there, there were two moments when he was there with the lacuna of 10 years between them. And as I understand, the active process of writing of the book happened when he was already in the United States. So for me, this is very much a different kind of TAMIZDAT project. That for us might shed very curious light on how these conversations happened. Thank you so much. Thank you, Yasha, and everyone. Yes,
And
How
we have
many
time.
printed pages would that whole thing be?
this is 71 page.
Well, you could put it in small type as an addendum to the book. That would not be that big a deal.
So the idea would be to republish
To
Salisbury's
put
book.
it- When the book is republished, which will be at some point, have this be an addendum. Because separate publication makes no sense here.
Right. Irina?
We have
How
one more
did
question.
Yeah, and I follow up on the question before. How did he collect these newspaper clippings?
From the Soviet publications, they were sent to him. Also, he collected huge library of books. In the Library of Congress, he went through every issue of Центральные толстые магазины, journal, pardon. And in general, his network of correspondence and advisors was very interesting, and we have a lot of evidence of that.
We have time for one more, and we have it from Em, yours.
Thank you. Well, this was just to follow up a little bit on the comments and information about publishing Ajog, and the first publication Professor Matic mentioned in Italian as being the usual way things were done for what was anticipated to be a bestseller. Why was that the case? I mean, there was the precedent of Pasternak's Dr. Zhivago and I guess Yevgenia Ginsburg also publishing, but how did that work? Did that establish the world rights then with Mondadori?
I don't know that, frankly. I know nothing about the legal aspects.
Yeah, it usually established the world rights, and it was Feltrinelli who had entree into Soviet circles.
Okay.
And it was an easy channel to him.
That was Zhivago, but
No, but
Byrne was Mondadori.
No, but he supposedly facilitated this too, and told Mondadori to take it.
And that was easier than doing it initially somewhere else?
Well, it's closer, but the point should be made, the minute that the Italian edition came out, the Aksionovs were stripped of their citizenship.
At the same time, it's curious that back to me in 1924, the first edition was in English, also in a foreign language. How, I don't know, I just thought of it more conceptually, I don't know. But publishing in Russian, I assume, publishing something in Russian You know, it didn't lead to transnational readers, right? I mean, it was
Transnational what?
readers. Publishing something in Russian only, or at first, etc., I think limited the possibility of transnational, or, you know,
It depended on whether you got the world rights. We got the world rights.
okay, yeah, I
the
see. I mean, I know nothing about the world rights aspect, so I may be talking about.
The Italians felt safe. It felt safer because there are very few readers in Italy for Russian literature.
True,
This is an established.
you're absolutely right, yeah.
And then-
Uh-huh, so it is really, you're saying it was a legal question, not that people,
It felt safer than, say, doing. it in
probably
Germany.
both were
Doing it in
important,
Germany, yeah.
in that sense, okay.
On this note, let's please join us for lunch on the 17th.